So Cuckoo is another horror film that Neon is releasing this year. They've had a pretty big year in terms of horror films. They're coming off of Long Legs, which we just talked about a couple of weeks ago. They also released Immaculate earlier this year. Decent, okay movie. But this film, Cuckoo, had its world premiere at the Berlin International Film Festival earlier this year in February, and ultimately Neon acquired the rights. And they started to drop out some marketing for it earlier in the summer, attached to films like Immaculate and Long Legs, and it looked really interesting. It looked like a really interesting new type of horror movie that was going to be certainly living up to the name that it has, and it's certainly starring a hot up and coming young star in Hunter Schafer, who has obviously made a lot of her fame on the hit show from HBO Euphoria, and has also been in a couple of other movies since then. But Hunter Schafer is obviously a pretty recognizable face for a certain demographic now, so certainly had some ingredients to be an interesting movie. But we got a chance to go check out this movie also this past weekend. So with all of that out the way, man, I will pass it to you. What do you think about this science fiction horror film, Cuckoo?
So Cuckoo is about Hunter Schafer's character, and her father and her family have moved into the German Alps. And they discover after they move into the German Alps that the new town has a bunch of weird shit happening in it. And so, long story short, what is happening and why is Hunter Schafer's character a victim of all these things that is happening? And so I think hearing that premise is like it's definitely something we've seen before, right? The whole family, we talk about fish out of water, but we've seen family stories out of water as well. And it's just it throws a bunch of cliches at the wall, and to be honest, a lot of them miss. And that is what this movie is for me, is a lot of things that feel like they could be interesting, but they just miss, and they're not as interesting as I think Tilman Singer thought they would be, at least to me. I like Hunter Schafer. I like what Hunter Schafer does here. I like the eeriness and the way these German Alps are shot. I think it looks good. I didn't mind looking at the movie. I was like, oh, that looks really cool. Ooh, look at this very interesting shot thing that's happening. But after so long, some of these movies, after so long, if you don't explain to me what's happening, to be honest, I check out. I don't know what's happening. Like, I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on anymore. I was interested, but now you took too long to tell me. I'm kind of out of here. You have lost me. And I think Cuckoo kind of follows that for me. And that doesn't always happen, but this movie, yeah, I think it was just trying to do too much for me. It was trying to be too and I still like movies like this where like, oh, they're too mysterious in the beginning and they're weird and you don't know what's happening. Cuckoo didn't do it for me. It didn't. It didn't keep me intrigued, unfortunately. And every time there was a new thing that would happen, a new question arose. And again, that feels like normal, but I didn't care about the question. I was like, I don't know if I care to explore that. And that sucks, man, because again, the feel of the movie is right, but the story, it was not there for me. And a lot of that follows suit. I will say Dan Stevens is playing a doctor in this, and I think he's killing it. I think Dan Stevens did tremendous here. He is playing the creepy, what the hell's going on guy in this movie. I think he does a really good job at it. But yeah, I don't think it was for me. You watch things for the plot, and sometimes the plot doesn't hit you, and this plot did not hit me. And I really wish it did. It got very boring for me. Yeah, and by the end of it, I was just like, oh, it's another one of those kind of, and that's how I walked away from the film. So overall, it just wasn't for me. It got boring for me, and it lost my interest. But I like the way it looked, and I like Hunter Schafer, and I like Dan Stevens, and that's about it for me.
Cuckoo is a movie I was excited for, and the trailers were cut together very well. It was really interesting marketing that they did for it. Left a lot of mystery, which I appreciate. They don't give away really too much of what it's about. You kind of find out what the story is about in the beginning. When you see the movie, you don't really have a better sense of it in the marketing of it. And so that all intrigues me. But the final product doesn't amount to really kind of more than a twisty journey that doesn't ever really find a way to resolve itself in a meaningful way. And I think I walked out of the film pretty disappointed just by what we had gotten, because I think the story is just kind of running circles around itself and not really landing on a particular idea or a particular answer about what exactly is happening here. You can tell that something sinister and something unnatural is going on. And when that's first presented in the film, that stuff it's curious. It piques your interest. It's like, okay, well, what's going on here? I want to dig deeper and understand like what is actually happening. And then the movie just plots along, progresses along, and we never really land on what that is. Or if we do, I just missed it and don't get it, because that also is a possibility that I just never really understood or comprehended what they were trying to go after with the story. And there's a particular antagonist in this film that sort of embodies what the evil is, and that particular character, I guess I would say, or that force, has a very unnerving, unsettling, screeching sound to them. And when I first heard it, I was like, "Oh, that sounds pretty scary and sounds pretty sinister." But once
Mhm.
that force is revealed and you understand like what they are, or I guess who they are, and they continuously employ that noise to unsettle you or unnerve you, well, it just becomes annoying after like the third time. Now I'm just sitting in this movie and I'm like, for goodness sakes, put a fucking lid on it. Let's just stop, because I'm getting annoyed by this consistent screeching and hollering and yelling that isn't really about anything. It's just for the sake of like, I guess, trying to impose a jump scare on you, if even that.
Mhm.
But beyond that, Hunter Schafer and Dan Stevens, they're doing completely opposite things from each other. They are very much
Mm.
playing very different characters from each other, which I think at times works and sometimes it doesn't
Mhm.
work. Like at times there's like a little bit of humor because they are like coming at it from very different places in terms of their performances and how they're handling the material. And Dan Stevens is really good. I mean, he's had a really successful year. He was good in
He
Abigail as
is.
well, and he
You're
comes
right.
and shows up here. Hunter Schafer is also really good. I love the physicality of her performance. She gets beat the fuck up a
Yes.
lot,
It's a good point.
blacked and
Mhm.
bruised and thrown all over the place. I mean, she goes through it in this movie, and I love that. I love that we see the scars physically that are imposed upon her just because of the violent acts that are happening around that. But outside of that, it doesn't really amount to anything that's interesting. I see what they were going after. This very much feels akin to some films that we've got from Julia DeCurno or Lars von Trier and things like that. These very psychological yet strange types of films, these psychological horror films, but it just couldn't land the plane for me in terms of, okay, here's kind of the story, here's the point, here's a very clear and understandable resolution. And even if they went for a more ambiguous type of story, which I can also appreciate, it wasn't ambiguous enough. It could have been maybe even more ambiguous. Like lean all the way
Mm.
into that. It felt like they were trying to kind of have it both ways, and that I don't think that ever really worked out for them. So unfortunate. Definitely was a disappointment for me, but hopefully for Tilman Singer, as he continues to make movies, it'll be more interesting things in the future. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the brand new horror film Cuckoo. If you've checked this out, hit us up and let us know what you think.